Let's talk about the last few days' events in Jamaica now. The man who was known, or is known as the world boss, Vybz Kartel, has been convicted of murder. He's one of the top reggae artists or Jamaican dancehall artists. His real name is Adidja Palmer. He was accused with four other men of the murder of Clive Lizard Williams, an acquaintance, 3 years ago. Sean Campbell, also known as Sean Storm, Kahira Jones and Andre St. John were also found guilty of the killing, and they'll all be sentenced on March the 27th. The fourth man, Shane Williams, was found not guilty. Authorities say the victim was beaten to death at Kartel's home after being lured there to answer for two missing illegal guns. His body has never been found. Abka Fitz-Henley is a journalist for the nationwide news network in Jamaica. He's covered all 65 days of the Vybz Kartel trial. Abka, what has been the reaction in Jamaica now, a few days after his conviction? What is the reaction in Jamaica to him being convicted of this crime? Initially, of course, the police were worried that his fans might cause trouble on the streets.
Indeed. Well, first, a very good evening to the folks in the United Kingdom. It would be good afternoon to my people here in Kingston, Jamaica, and across the Caribbean. Well, among fans of Vybz Kartel, it's really a sense of shock at the guilty verdict. I don't know if it's surprise, but more shock. And among law enforcement and certainly among some of the nation's leaders, it's a sense of relief. Indeed, we've had a situation where the Minister of National Security, Peter Bunting, he has come out and commended the jurors, commended the police, commended the prosecution for carrying out good work, brave work in his words, in having Kartel convicted. But among Kartel supporters, they are angry. Some have taken to the streets. Back in his base in Portmore, St. Catherine, there were reports of a few shots being heard on the day of the verdict last week, Thursday. A few shots in the vicinity of the Supreme Court. Local law enforcement, they have blamed that on supporters of Kartel. So, in summary, a mixed reaction here in Kingston, Jamaica, and certainly some places in the Caribbean to the guilty verdict of Vybz Kartel.
How did Vybz Kartel, this man who is not just one of the biggest and most successful reggae artists, or if you want to call it reggae, dancehall artist of all time, how did he get himself in this mess?
Well, Kartel was born on January 7, 1976 in Port St. Catherine. It's some sort of an inner city community in Waterford, Portmore. He grew up in what you call a nuclear home. Wasn't very uncomfortable, but his exposure in the early 2000s, he came onto the scene. He was reputed for music, espousing what you call badness or gangster lyrics. He speaks of girls in his songs. He speaks of his wealth. And certainly he formed a Portmore Empire, a musical group that many of the members of the empire, they invariably found themselves in trouble with the law. And according to the evidence that came out in court, Kartel, if it's to be believed, Kartel used the wealth or money he earned from dancehall music to purchase guns. So that was what was alleged by the prosecution, illegal guns. He distributed it to members of his Portmore posse, and they carried out illicit activity in not only the nation's capital but across Jamaica. That's the allegation from the prosecution. It is alleged that Clive Lizard Williams, his life was taken because two of those guns went missing. You see, the thing about Vybz Kartel that makes him different from the more preeminent dancehall artists in Jamaica is that he's been able to attract attention from the very top of society, the power brokers, law enforcement. Certainly, back in 2010, had a reason to meet with Kartel in a bid to cauterize violence that was overtaking a certain section of the corporate area in Mannings Hill Road. And later, the business of the lotto scam. Kartel released the tune. The essence of it was that lotto scam was not really criminal activity, but was equivalent to reparations. And you had the country's security minister, Peter Bunting, speaking in the United States, denouncing Kartel's music, which is very popular, not only among inner city people in Jamaica, but all classes.
I love his music. But we can't excuse somebody guilty of committing a murder, can we? We cannot excuse that. And I just wonder how much of this, Abka, is down to a certain lifestyle. Many of us will be familiar with Jamaican reggae music as it was. And that lifestyle was a Rasta lifestyle, whether you agreed with that or not, whether you agreed with smoking herb or not. That was often the worst that would happen to a reggae artist, that they'd be incarcerated for smoking some weed. But now you have a different lifestyle associated with a different offspring, if you like, a different branch of Jamaican music, whether you want to call it dancehall or bashment or whatever. How much of Vybz Kartel's dilemma is down to following a certain lifestyle, and is that lifestyle is that lifestyle intrinsic in the music?
It is intrinsic in dancehall music, the lifestyle of badness. You know, I see the international media, folks in the United States publications, they have used dancehall music and reggae music synonymously. It's not quite the case. Reggae music, espoused by legends like Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, it's more a conscious kind of uplifting music. Dancehall music over the years from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, it has taken on a flavor where it promotes gangsterism, and certainly Kartel has fallen into that whole push where the fans of the music, they expect a certain level of badman music, gangster music, but as it were, indicated in the verdict delivered by the court, it appears it wasn't a case of only life imitating art, but art imitating life, because Kartel was found guilty of not only singing or verbalizing this whole gangsterism in the music, but actually carrying out the act. You know, he's not the first dancehall practitioner to espouse gun lyrics, so to speak, and he's certainly not the first convicted in relation to that.
And no doubt he won't be the last either. And he's a multi-millionaire, isn't he?
Yes, certainly, and he's been able to hire one of the more prominent attorneys in the country, Tom Tavares Finson, in order to defend him. He said, Finson, that he's going to be appealing the verdict. I know the Afrocentric tone of this program, you know. An interesting thing about Kartel is that this whole concept of bleaching one's skin, Kartel was a dark person when he came onto the scene in the late 1990s, early 2000s. But last week, Thursday, when he was convicted, he was a brown man. Generally in Jamaica, in the early 2000s, it was not really accepted for a man or any person to bleach their skin. But Kartel is one of the first persons, public figures, who came out and accepted, announced that he espouses bleaching.
Saw that cake soap that he's been using apparently as well. And look, listen, I'm going to have to leave it there. Hopefully we can talk at a later date much more about dancehall music and what's happening to music in Jamaica and the artist as well. As Buji once said, I love my car, I love my bike, I love my money and ting. But most of all, I don't love to be a Browning. Not tonight anyway, not if I have to bleach myself to it. Abka Fitz-Henley, thanks very much, journalist for the Nationwide News Network in Jamaica.
Thank you so much for having me.